Sonic Talk.
Hello everybody, welcome to Sonic Talk number 589, recording live today, Wednesday the 11th of September. In fact, if you've been searching for us, I'd just like to apologise because YouTube have decided to change the UI for the streaming now setup, and so I've been chasing around the internet looking for the right URL to put in. So if you're watching this, then obviously I've done it right. If you're not, then I've done it wrong, but you'll be watching this not in real time because I'm recording this locally, so you will be able to actually watch it, if that makes sense. So I'm not making a lot of sense. I hate these moments when you're just about to go live and everything, you get a technological curveball. It's always a little bit distressing. Anyway, this is a music technology podcast, not a streaming podcast. We talk about synthesizers, we talk about music technology, we talk about software, music production, studio work, live production, everything around the kind of ecosystem of writing, creating, recording, and releasing music. Of all kinds. So I want to say welcome to all our guests. Hello to those that did find it into the chat room. We seem to have some people there, and also in the IRC. The IRC I need to set up, so we'll quickly skip over that. But I want to say thank you to Isotope. Isotope will, of course, be providing a prize, which will be, of course, Isotope Neutron 3, which is the excellent mixing and mastering plugin. We will be able to bring you information about that. It's roughly about halfway through the show, so sit back and enjoy the show. We have a full guest house this week, and those of you who've been watching over the summer where we've had sort of slightly slower news week, shall we say, will probably be in shock like the rest of us are, because last week we had a whole bunch of stuff to look at, and this week there's a ton more. In fact, last week I knew what was coming, but I had to sign an NDA to film the Roland kit so that we could release it the day after, so it missed the show date by a day, and they went live at 7 o'clock in the morning on UK time. So it was all a bit late night and last minute. But anyway, let's get some guests on, because you've heard enough of me. We'll start with, let's say hello to a new guest who is Mr. Godfrey. Godfrey, we haven't seen you for ages. In fact, we haven't seen you since your last studio. You've moved. Or at least moved rooms. I don't know if you moved house. Jem, of course, music producer, live performer, founder, member and player in Frost, the sort of progressive rock act. How are you?
I'm good actually. The irony is this is the studio after the studio.
Oh, it's been that long.
Studio I last came. Yeah, because what happened was I moved into the deepest, darkest sort of nowhere shire, and my broadband was a heady and breathtaking 7 meg. So basically what happened was there was no live streaming at all. So I've since moved there. I've since sold that house and moved to sunny Tunbridge Wells, where I've now got a much healthier 368. So I'm back.
So you could actually, there's a joke, isn't there? I can't remember what it is, the long-running BBC radio show where people write in and complain, and it's usually. Do you live anywhere near Mrs. Trellis of Tunbridge Wells? I think it's.
She's just over there. Yes, she is. I can see her. See her back garden.
Excellent. That is a joke that will not translate anywhere. It won't even translate through age groups. So you're going to have to be a very specific age and of this country. So sorry about that, but it's my prerogative. So Jem, what have you been up to? I mean, you look like you've been busy. I mean, everything's right out there up front. See, I can see you've got an emulator too, and that's your vintage rack. And what have you been doing? Oh.
Yeah, I'm doing 80s.
Aha!
It's all good.
Covers.
It's all happening. I've got me.
Are you doing a Benny Hill remix?
I can do. I've got. Check this out. Straight out of the 80s.
That is just totally brilliant.
I see the emulator. It's brilliant. It just goes to show that things not necessarily better in the 80s. So, yes.
Right. But what have you been up to? Have you been doing? Have you been kind of, because when we first met you'd been doing pop production and session keys and composition. What's currently filling your work life?
Frost is sort of back up and running again. We're doing 2 albums at the same time. We're doing albums 4 and 5 at the same time. So we're quite busy at the moment. We're about to go off. Me and the guitarist are off to go into Cornwall to do a writing week in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm just sort of gearing up for that, and it's all systems go, really. So yeah, just keeping myself to myself and working hard and carrying on, really.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like fun. So, are you doing? Are these two single? Are you doing two albums at the same time? Are they double album gatefolds, or are you going for the sort of traditional CD?
It's just you remember how like when they did the Matrix 2 and 3 and Back to the Future 2 and 3, they filmed them all at the same time. So I just thought I'd sort of, because it's very difficult to get the musicians together at the same time. I thought I'd just kill two birds with one stone, just do the albums all at the same time. So.
That's a great idea. Right. Well, that sounds really good. Well, I'm sure people will be looking forward to that. I know Gaz is a big fan of that area of music. I don't know about Yoad. Well, let's go to Yoad. That was my link there. Well, that's brilliant. And we've got Yoad Nevo here also. Seamless, almost. Yoad Nevo, I think you must be in Tel Aviv, because I don't recognise that.
In Tel Aviv
room.
at the moment, yeah.
Yoad, of course, mixer, producer, Waves developer. I would like to point out that we went to London a couple of weeks ago when we went up for the Roland launch, which we'll get onto, and we popped in to see Yoad in his new studio because he's moving. And I have to say, it was really impressive, and I had a lovely time. And I have to say, I've been telling everybody how fabulous I thought your mixes sounded. And I don't know whether I'm sure it's your work, but it's also your fantastic monitoring environment. So. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Well, they do translate quite well outside the studio as well.
Always a bonus.
Which is what you want. Yeah. But thank you. Yeah. No, it was great seeing you.
It was great fun.
Yeah.
Well, that was our first in real life encounter, which is weird, isn't it? We have that thing where you've been talking to someone for several years over video conferencing and you've never actually met them, and it's that kind of curious. There must be a word. Is there a kind of? There must be a sort of phrase to describe that feeling. It's not like deja vu, but applied to that particular scenario. I don't know what it is. Maybe Gaz, you're always very good at coming up with new words and phrases for things. Maybe that's one you could work on. Gaz Williams, professional bass player, music technologist and whatnot. How are you?
Yes. I'm very good, thank you very much. Yeah, very good link. I'd just like to show something first. Now, a couple of weeks, or maybe actually a couple of months ago, I was proudly showing how the MyVolt's ripcord was powering the Analog 4. I mean, some of you might remember it went through the whole show and then lasted another 10 hours just running it off one of these kind of batteries that you get for, recharging, the larger ones you can do for recharging iPads and the like. The only thing was, I didn't have any audio plugged in. I was using the Electron Analog 4 and it was all working. I got the sequencer working, but I didn't have it. I actually went to try it out again and there was no sound. So it was a terrible. I was like, oh no, because I was. So I was very embarrassed, but to save face, MyVolts have actually created a little thing that solves the problem. And here I have an Analog 4.
Yeah.
And if I switch it on, and look at this little doobry. Can you see that there?
Yeah, I can. Is basically that like an earthy thing?
Well, it means that you can have two. Cable. You can see why disasters happen in this studio.
Yeah, right. As you yank things across to get them in shot.
Yeah. So there's this little thing, and basically it means that two ripcords can feed something. So basically, I think nine each. Yeah, they come together. Each ripcord can provide 9 watts. So this means that the 18 watts means now the moment of truth. Yes.
I like it in the groove. Excellent. That's bizarre you should say that, because I got one of these today as well, which is a little mixer. I think it's like
mixer.
I don't know what it's called. Well, I haven't had a chance.
It's like mixer. It's like it's an Irish mixer, isn't it? So they've called it the mixer.
Easy.
No, they have. I mean,
they are Irish. Yeah, that's true. I suppose that's fair.
They are claiming it. So that's actually pretty cool. Have you tried it out yet?
No, I literally just opened the box.
Ta-da!
Oh yeah. Well, maybe we can talk about it later. I don't. Okay. This show isn't quite sponsored by my bank.
No, that's true.
At this point,
I needed to show.
I feel like I should show something as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel like I should show something as well. And what I have here.
Oh.
I have a USB 1 hub.
Oh, awesome. I've heard
Vintage.
the silver version ones sound better somehow. There's a definite
Yeah.
It's more.
Yeah.
Excellent, good
There's
stuff.
something about the sound of USB 1 that I really like.
Yeah, it's that multiplexing, that little multiplexing whine that adds a sort of like, it's just excellent, isn't it? Crikey. Well, we are flippant today, but there is a lot of stuff to go on. I think we should probably begin because there actually, as I said, there's sort of almost more news than we've got the ability to start with. So let's start with a little bit of I've got 4 videos from Roland. If I press the first button, I can't remember which one is listed first, but brand new releases. Roland did their big release. We went over to Abbey Road and we went and filmed a load of stuff with David Ireland, and the first one is yes, Jupiter XM. Oh, I think I marked out rather than marked in. That's a bit of a mistake, isn't it? Reset.
Wow.
Go on.
Come on, man.
That's disappointing, isn't it? Let's see if that works now. Come on, try again. Yeah, here we go. So this is the Jupiter XM being played by David Ireland using the eye arpeggiator, which is quite clever. It sort of figures out the spacing and the clustering of notes and will adjust the clock and the density and all that and the range of all of these things and spread it amongst the 5 parts. So essentially Jupiter XM is a new engine. It's not ACB, it's got something else. It do up to 256 voices across 5-part multi-timbral. It's got a JP engine. It still uses the plug-out kind of concept, but they're not the same stuff. It's slightly less CPU intensive, so they can give you more voices. So I think the idea of this is it becomes the centre of if you need a lot of sounds in the way that, like the old JV1080 and the XV5080 used to use them as the meat and potatoes, the big polyphonic engine of your productions. So it's got a JV, an XV engine, a JP engine, an SH engine, a JX engine, and an RD engine, which I believe is the Supernatural piano. And there's loads of stuff, and it's very much got the Jupiter livery and all of those things. And we saw it in person. It sounds very good, actually, but they've sort of gone a weird way around because there's a big version, which is the JPX. Have I got it here? This guy, which is massive. This is much bigger, full size. It's got more controls on it. It looks very Jupiter 80 and, gives you all of that stuff, but a lot more control, whereas the X has less so much of the control, but the same engine. So, thoughts, anybody? Who'd like to go first? Has anyone had a chance to listen? I mean, I know that because there's a lot of this Roland stuff to go through. So, I know, Jem, you're a keyboard player. You've been a Roland artist. I don't know whether the X is something that is likely to be on your radar because it's depends whether or not it's the sort of thing that you would use. But does it light any fires under your creative wallet juices?
It's certainly interesting. I think it's kind of it's 256 voices, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, which should do for a bit.
Yes, yeah. 10. All I need is 10. So it's kind of it's. I mean, yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm curious as to why one is being released so far away from the other one. I don't know whether one will harm the sales of the other one, but.
Well, I think the X is probably coming next year. They said because when we saw it, the prototype was not. It wasn't a working one, whereas the X is working and done. I don't know why that is.
We've obviously because all the boutique range sort of came out. It does feel perhaps a little bit like it's. Although obviously the polyphony is much bigger, and I think the engine is now an A core, is it, or Zen core or something?
Yeah, I think it's different.
So yeah, I mean, I think if you're already in possession of the boutique synths, then I'm not. Well, I suppose you've got the JX engine and stuff in this one.
You got much more polyphony, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, I think as a keyboard player myself, I think the mini keys are a bit of a turn off. But then if there's a bigger one next year, then maybe that's worth having a look at. But yeah, it sounds good. It sounds great.
It does sound good. I know, Yoad, I mean, we went to your studio. You've got a lot of lovely old classic synths. Not so many sort of brand new. I suppose you've got the Rev 2, but I don't know whether this is the sort of thing that floats your boat or not. I mean, and one thing I will say about the M, is there's a lot. I had a fiddle with one, and there's a lot of parameters under the hood, and it is a bit like editing a 90s synthesizer, which is a bit disappointing. That's why I'll just throw that into the mix.
But all these new releases, it kind of makes me think whether I should really, hold on. Obviously, I'm not going to sell anything, but since I'm not using those that often, like on a daily basis, and I tend to use plugins. I have the Omnisphere 2.6 with all the emulation of these classics keyboards and all that. The presets are really nice. It doesn't sound anything like the real thing, but the presets sound quite similar, but the overall sound is not the same. But you can kind of get used to it, or even because it serves the same purpose in a track, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And since I'm not using that much, sometimes I would use a bass line of the SH101 and stuff like that, but I don't use them on a daily basis. And this Jupiter X thing, it sounds really lovely. And since it contains the engines of the other boutique line, then it's almost like a one-stop shop. Instead of buying all these boutique boxes which give you 4 voices each and all that, you can buy a big, I don't know if you can, is it multi-timbral? I forget.
5-part, 5-part multi-timbral.
5-part, over 256 voices, so you can use 5 boutique ones at the same time with more polyphony than each one. So that's kind of, and maybe even the price works itself out if you wanted to go in that direction. So I'm thinking, since I have a lot of hardware that I'm not using, I might as well buy it and have another piece of hardware that I'm not using and use plugins.
That's an interesting angle. I mean, because I hadn't really thought about that and the pricing. Because first look, the Jupiter XM, which is the Mini, is we got the price. It was €1,400, which seems that's kind of a chunk of change. So it's quite a lot of cash. I don't know, Gaz. I mean, it feels to me like Roland it's like so close with that one, but not quite. Everybody's screaming for analog rather than a box that will play a load of emulations of their greatest hits.
Yeah, the greatest hits. It's kind of like that, isn't it? I mean, I think the whole launch this time was curious. Are we going to talk about some of the other things in the launch?
Yeah, we are. There's do you want to get onto that? I mean, I suppose we could do that. Now that's what I call Roland. I'm going to use that as the title. Right, hold on.
Well, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at what the XM is, and also the X as well, as you say, it's like a kind of best of. They also have just launched the new Phantom, which
yes,
I think it's just Phantom only in name. I think it's a completely brand new machine, very premium priced as well. Top end,
€3,200 for the 6 and up. Yeah.
Yes. So, and I was kind of thinking about this relative to the Jupiter X as well, which, the Jupiter X does have like a creative aspect to it, but it also is like, as you say, like a bit of a best of. So, I wonder just how much the Phantom and the Jupiter X sort of share in terms of
not much
sound.
Well, I can tell you a little bit about that.
Okay.
This was what was really curious. We went to Metropolis Studios, where Roland have got their kind of demo HQ, where they're based in London. But the event was at Abbey Road. We went to Abbey Road, and they had a dealer event. They split into two. So the dealer event was where they gave all the facts and figures and had all the performances, and then they had this sort of YouTube influencers and guests, which just basically turned up for free canopies and a free bar, and it was great. It was a really good event, without us having to. It was like going to a timeshare kind of meeting without having to go through the talk. You just got the kind of good bit, and but they didn't have any. So as a result, nobody really knew much about what the specs were. So I do, because I did the stuff with David Ireland. So I take your point about that. I think I've sort of lost my thread. What was the last point you made that I interrupted? With my half-baked.
I was going to say that I was finding it quite curious how they're kind of looking at the kind of person who's going to buy the Phantom and the person who will buy the Jupiter X as a very different customer base.
Yes, I see what you mean.
Yeah, and if they are in a way similar things, but just with a different skin, so to speak.
Yeah, which reminds me what I was going to say. The Phantom has the V piano engine in it.
Right.
As a thing, which is quite a big deal, and it sounds bloody great. It really sounded good. In fact, the interface was, I think Axel Hartman had a piece of it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a workstation person, so I don't know how applicable that is. I mean, maybe I should quickly play a little bit of, just so you can see what we're talking. That's it. That's the Phantom X. Bit new. I won't play a load. There's loads of videos all online about it and everything. So
yeah. I was just going to. The only thing I was going to say though was that, like, surely this would have been the time for Roland to have brought out a new V-synth instead. If they were going to be bringing out big synths, a new V-synth would just be fantastic now, because the original V-synth and the V-synth GT were really, really great, hampered, I think, by the available technology of the time.
CPU was a bit slow and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and the loading time really frustrating, So with all of the kind of all this kind of fast. Yeah, but that's what I was thinking, that they've kind of now got this kind of weird sort of like the the Jupiter X isn't this just like isn't what everyone wanted, really.
It's not a sound design machine.
No, so it's sort of it, and the Phantom. It's like it's all a bit weird, a bit confused, I think. However, I mean, actually, out of the two, I think I actually prefer the Phantom.
That's an interesting point. I mean, Jem, you're obviously are an MD and have been an MD, music director, which is, you're right, you are squarely the Phantom target audience, I would imagine. You would be going out live, you'd be able to run a whole bunch of stuff on it, you'd be kind of, it would be the only keyboard you're going to need, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually physically it's quite interesting, because it looks a bit motify. Montagey, sorry. It's kind of got that slightly Yamaha. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that, but I'm not a Roland artist anymore, so I can say what I like. So, but the thing I was looking at the specs on this, and the thing that is very surprising is that it doesn't do multi-sampling, as in you can't load your own samples in and sort of map them across the keyboard. And when I used the Phantom X and the Phantom G to bits, and I know them inside out because I used to use them all the time. And you could load samples in, and you could, like, for example, if you've got tricky bits on albums, or you've got certain sounds that are from soft synths, you can. It was really useful to be able to sample those sorts of sounds and stick them in the Phantoms and actually just play them live and have them as samples. But this one doesn't do it, and the FA08 before it didn't do it either. And it just seems a bit. It's such a sort of.
It's like a fundamental of life. Yeah, it's such a fundamental.
Yeah, it's such a fundamental sort of tool to have. I mean, the Kronos does it, which is one of the reasons why I use those now live, because they're very, very well spec'd in that respect. But even the Kronos came out in 2011. I mean, that's old tech now.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of I just feel like they're missing a massive trick. I mean, if it could sample and they made a rap version, I'd have two of them and take them on the road straight away. It would just be brilliant. But it just feels like they're missing something.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, I don't know how many of you, but most of us probably have been involved in the transition from the album to live, and you have to provide all the bits. Yes, you try and make as much of it as live. I've done it on several albums, and there are some bits which is it might be a weird old Russian synth that just has exactly the right filter articulation in that part, so you might either chop it up into a sort of few keyboard zones, so the keyboard player is playing one thing in one hand and triggering some other stuff. So it's still live, and that is the bread and butter of modern album reproduction live, unless you're just going to run multi-tracks, which most people try not to do. And the Phantom, these new Phantoms, if that's the case, they just don't address that in any way, unless it's stems.
Yeah,
you're just kind of playing it off the sequence. So yeah, that's a valid point. I did not know that, but then I'm not really a workstation kind of person. I don't know. Yeah, does a workstation have any interest for you? I guess it probably.
And again, in the form of a plugin, I use the Nexus 2 a lot, which is kind of a workstation.
You played me some of that, and it sounded great. Yeah.
Yeah, it just sounds really good, and it has a lot of samples and loads of presets, and it's quite tweakable. I mean, it's not, you can't really dive deep. They give you a sort of a sound, and then you can tweak it. So it's not a preset creating machine, but it's rather a preset playing machine. But it has loads of sounds, and it sounds really good. And again, you can open as many as you want. in a session and it's a plugin. There's something about for studio work, which is what the majority, or
it's what you do.
It's what I do basically. Yeah, and since it's digital anyway, then for me the form of a plugin, it makes much more sense. Because even with the Jupiter X being 5-part multi-timbral, it's kind of okay, but eventually you'll have to record it to audio, and then what happens if you want to change the tempo or the key or something like that? So you're always limited, and with plugins, it's just there. So, but at the same time, I really like the concept of, there's something about the sound of workstations that, historically, because they were very limited in memory and all that, now all the Tyrus and Cronus and all that are just PCs basically, so you can have probably running Linux or something, and you can have as much as you like. But historically they were very limited, and people had to work really hard, especially Roland were the champions of that kind of era, and they used to work really hard on making the most out of the limited amount of memory, and they got some really nice sounds. And I still use some of the old Akai samples which are like that as well, like a cello that is like 2 megabytes in size and something like that, but there's something about those sounds, and I really like it. And I would definitely buy the Phantom in the form of a plugin. So this is something that I would like to see in
Cloud, maybe
or the library or something like that.
Yeah, maybe the Roland Cloud. I suspect this is all heading into this convergence thing with the Roland stuff. I'm wondering whether or not, because Roland have got another 2 products, and I feel if we front load, maybe we should go to some other stuff and then maybe come back to the other products later, just so that there's a little bit of variance. But before we do that, I'm just going to have a quick message from our friends over at Isotope, and it's competition time and plugging time.
Presenting Neutron 3, the modern way to mix. Bring your workflow into the 21st century with 8 modern mixing tools, all at your fingertips in one mothership plugin. Starting a mix can take a while, but with the all-new Mix Assistant, Neutron can listen to your audio and quickly suggest a custom starting point for an individual track, or set levels for your entire mix. Shape sounds like never before with the new Sculptor module. Match audio to a target sonic profile and instantly sculpt it to sound more like itself or like something else completely. Reach out and touch your audio with Neutron's immersive controls and visualizations. Neutron 3 comes equipped with Visual Mixer, a tool to help you effortlessly manipulate the landscape of your mix. Neutron 3, the modern way to mix.
And of course, you could download a 10-day fully functional demo from Isotope. You just need to get up an account. We want to say you can, in fact, you can win a copy of Neutron 3 Advanced if you just don't want to enter the competition. We're looking for the hashtag #RepairMixMaster. That's all one word, just for brevity. And the hashtag Neutron 3, that's the number 3 and the word Neutron, to @Sonicstate and @Isotope Inc. That's the hashtag #RepairMixMaster. And the hashtag Neutron 3 to @Sonicstate and @Isotope Inc. And if you enter, we'll be running a competition next week. Actually, next week, it's a bit borderline as to whether we're going to get the podcast done, because we're actually going to Tokyo for the Japan for the Yamaha 40 Years of Synths event. We're very fortunate to be invited to go, and you don't turn down a jolly like that because they don't come along very often. So we're going to be in Tokyo, heading to Tokyo, but we may have time before we go to do that. But I want to say also the winner of last week's competition is not Jem, but it's this guy. There's probably some. Yay! Thank you very much. We pulled a winner from the last week, and it's somebody called microcnc.se or @microcnc, which I'm wondering if that's some sort of CNC is lathes, isn't it? So I wonder if it's something there's something to do with micro engineering or something. But if you want to get in touch, microcnc, then we will be able to get Isotope and hook you up with a full copy of Neutron 3. So thank you very much for joining, and entering the competition, and also to Isotope for providing the prize. Right. Okay, well, let's get on to different end of the scale. Another manufacturer, yet another product out this week. And this was
Hello and welcome
to
our Sonic Lab special. We've got Jackson here from Modal Electronics, and we're very fortunate that Modal are actually just down the road in Bristol, which means quite often we get the opportunity to see something you're working on, and that's kind of what you brought in today, right?
That's it. We've got an early production prototype of a new family member, Argon 8.
So this is a brand new synthesizer.
Brand new, yeah, new to the Modal family, although leaning on some of the older tech that we've kind of released over the past few products and building on it into something a little bit more, just a little bit higher end, I guess.
So, right, okay, you can watch the video. It's up online. In fact, if you haven't already seen, we're going to have some more stuff coming from NobCon, because NobCon was at the weekend, and Jim, our reporter who's handling stuff out there for us, Air Monkey Music, I don't know if he might be in the chat room, he's got a whole bunch of videos, including another presentation with the Modal Argon 8. Briefly, 8-voice digital synthesizer with aftertouch enabled FATAR, nice keybed. So it's a kind of step up. And this, again, is another wavetable synth. I mean, we're starting to kind of, this is really what with the Hydra synth the week before, wavetable is really becoming front and center, and it's becoming, it's sort of muscling its way in as the kind of, you know, one of the four runners of modern digital technology. I'm sure Waldorf must be going, we told you years ago, why didn't you buy more of our products? But, you know, it's the way. I know. Jem, does wavetable synthesis excite you in the same way that it seems to be getting everybody else hot under the collar? The possibilities seem to be endless.
No.
No, that's fine.
No, it is. It's kind of, it's I mean, it does seem to be the synthesis method du jour, doesn't it, at the moment? And the Hydra synth, actually, I looked at the thing last week. That does look really interesting. That did sound really nice. But it's kind of, I always find whenever I try and use wavetable stuff, it always sounds quite sort of brittle and harsh. And I always struggle to kind of get it in a mix unless it's the lead thing, like bass or something. It's not really. It's kind of, I don't know. It always sounds sort of quite cold to me. I don't know why.
Okay. It needs a lot of filtering, doesn't it? It needs the right kind of filtering. Perhaps, yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point, and I think that's traditionally always been the case as well. Although I guess the sample rates that we're using now and the bit depths are probably higher than when we were, you know, using 8-bit and probably 20. Well, probably. I mean,
because they're looking at the quantum, isn't it? The Waldorf quantum, and that looks it's an extraordinary, amazing looking thing. And then I've trawled through as much YouTube stuff as I can find, and a lot of it does seem to be that kind of, you know, it's just sort of metallic, kind of sort of Heather Small kind of synthesis. So it's kind of. So yeah, I don't know. No offense. I don't know. What does everybody else think? I'm not really.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm not really catching my table.
I can comment on that. I can comment on that because I was involved in the development of Codex, which is a wavetable synthesizer. Basically, what you have in a traditional subtractive synthesizer is that the most, or the whitest, that's how we call it, shape you can get is a sawtooth. So that's the shape with the most harmonics that you can get, and out of that you take some of the high frequencies usually out with addition of resonance, and that's how you get your sound, and that's why it's called subtractive synthesis. Wavetable is based on samples which are looped, and that gives you two things. One is the ability to sample things which are whiter than sawtooth, which means that the harmonics doesn't go down gradually, so they can basically, you can create a waveform out of additive synthesis, which can go like that. So it can be, it can have more harmonics, and that's why it can sound a lot brighter. So that's one thing that contributes to the fact that it's so bright. The other one being the fact that it's looped. So basically you have a tiny sample which is looped, and that's in each table, each slot is looped, and when you scan the table, you scan between each slot, you get the the shapes, the the motion or the animation or whatever you want to call it. The fact that these tiny samples are looped also create some artifacts because of the looping. Even if you use crossfades and stuff like that, these are tiny loops, and they can have pitch, which is actually reflected on your original fundamental pitch.
They have their
and
own.
They introduce a lot of harmonics which sound kind of metallic. So those two factors really contribute to the, as technology advances, we can do better smoothing, better interpolation, and all that. And you can get a lot of smooth sounds out of wavetable synthesis. It's just a matter of the oscillator in conjunction with the filter and how you use them. So you don't have to necessarily open the filter all the way up like you have to do with subtractive synth. Right. You can, play with it and make it smooth. But I agree with what Jem says. There's something kind of a little bit metallic about it. Some people like it. I like it in some ways.
I must say, because the Sculpt is based on. It's not just wavetable with the Sculpt. There is wavetable, but there's also some other clever digital stuff going. It's a purely digital synth. The Sculpt I really liked. I thought it sounded great, and I think this technology is very similar to what they had in the Sculpt. I mean, we did that jam, didn't we, at the Sonicstate Live, and I just think it sounds lovely. I mean, so this is. I mean, and this is fairly well priced. I mean, they're trying. Modal are trying to kind of make the synth that presumably will make the company kind of have a bigger future, and they can do bigger and bolder things because they've
But it's curious, isn't it, as a company that they launched with high-end, very expensive synthesizers, almost like the most expensive synthesizers on the market or close to, and then came out with like those sort of clipped together the original versions of the Craft synth, the cheapest, like the most ridiculous, different, the furthest ends of the market, and then through the Sculpt and the Craft 2, they've been sort of moving up a little bit, and now this feels like this is 579.
It's pretty reasonably priced
on there.
That's good.
8 voice
and
good quality key bed.
And I can't tell exactly because I've only seen it just briefly, but nicely laid out, and intelligently and attractively laid out. It's very well featured, isn't it? I mean, what is it? 3 envelopes? Two
it is. I mean, it's very, and it's got a whole bunch of. It's got 3 effects generators in it, which you can then access externally without going through the VCA and all of that stuff. I mean, the response. I have to say the response has been very good in the comments. But yeah.
Well, I think they've got the price just right. I mean, it's sort of going really head to head with the Minilog XD, which obviously is a hybrid synth. However, the more polyphony and obviously the wavetable focus of this. Regarding wavetables, though, I mean, I love wavetable synthesis. I really do. On the Sledge, I've always enjoyed that aspect of having one oscillator, which you can have as a wavetable oscillator, and then the other 2, which are essentially VA kind of oscillators. And it's that exact thing that Jem's talking about, which is it's like that metallic kind of thing, but when you kind of blend it together with the other oscillators, I find it really creative. But I also think that for a lot of maybe younger people who are just getting into the hardware world, this is going to be very attractive to them, and maybe their first experience sort of wavetable synthesis. Or there may even be a path through people who like using Gadget or the I was thinking the Electribe Wave, which is an iPad. I think it might be iPhone as well, but certainly iPad update of the Electribe that is essentially a wavetable Electribe. Right. Reminds me a little bit of the way that that when they did their virtual version of the Wave Station, sort of again similar
I get it.
kind of a approach. So I think it's a very smart move of Modal, and I think it's going to be, and hope it's going to be a really good success for them.
I hope so too. I mean, they're just down the road, and if they have any parties because of their success, I like to feel that we might get invited.
Oh yeah, come on, bring us along.
It's really interesting, and I think this is quite a positive and powerful thing. I mean, honestly, this week it's almost impossible to cover everything because there's so much synth news. I mean, whereas over the summer, like I say, we've been struggling to kind of find. I mean, we should go back to the Rolands as well because we've got the Roland Boutique JU 06A, which. I mistakenly, I can't believe I made this error on camera and left it in the edit, but I thought I was right, was that it's got the model of the 60 and the 106, so it's an update of the Boutique 106, but it's got the 60 oscillator as well, or the 60 model, so you can flip between the two and you get the presets. But as many people were saying, why didn't you take the opportunity to make it a 6 voice? That would have been the absolute killer blow, that would have been the bam, have a bit of that, but it's unfortunately that's not been the case, but they're not making this limited edition. So that's a good one. I don't know how you feel about that. Because, Jem, you were talking about boutiques, were you? I mean, a boutique's something that you would consider using because it's just because of the portability.
Yeah, again, it's just 2 voices shy, isn't it? I think that's the certainly with the Juno stuff. I mean, it's I had a System 8 for a while.
Yeah, good synth. Good synth.
It's a really good synth. I really liked it. It's a great synth. And I thought the 106 model was particularly accurate. It was. I used to have a 106, and it really was that kind of, I remember all these sounds, and the hiss and the chorus and all that kind of. It was just really nicely done, but it seems a bit strange to lose 2 voices. I mean, it's.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I suspect because also we've got to bear in mind the first boutiques came out several years ago. DSP technology must have moved on, but I suspect what's happened is because Roland have their own custom chips, to design a new custom chip which would then have the capability for the extra 2 voices. Wouldn't make sense for a single release, so they've had to use they've used the dies and maybe the stock that they had of those. So that's why they can't do it, which is a shame because, like I said, it would have been a brilliant addition to.
Can't they just put 2 chips in each one?
Well, again, I know that's probably has implications for power and all of that kind of stuff. I know. Yeah, Ad, I mean, you were talking about getting boutiques and whatnot. I mean, this one, I have to say, it did sound really nice.
It sounds really lovely. I'm just wondering whether the one on the Phantom and the Jupiter X, whether it sounds similar, whether it has the 60 emulation or just the 106.
I think it just has the 106, I believe.
106. I wonder what will be the difference because it's not the real thing. The real thing had the kind of randomness of the VCO. So, but that
you know what I that's what I thought. Apparently, the Juno 60 and the Juno 6 were not VCOs either. They were also DCOs, and I made the same mistake. And people were going all over me in the comments because it's like, no,
it's the 6. It's just the 6 that is VCOs, isn't it?
Oh, is it? I was partially right then. Hooray! I was close. Because in order to have presets, it has to be DCOs because you have to be able to control. So that's why I'm not quite sure what is. I mean, there is a difference between the 60 and the 106, but it's not as much as between the 6 and the 60. You know what I mean? But it does. What I wanted to say about the voices is that I used to have the Tetra, the Dave Smith Tetra, and I started with one, and then I bought another one, and I kind of linked them together so you can get 8-voice polyphony, and that makes a lot of difference because the 4 is not quite. Well, you get notes, Steve. You don't get that lush overhang,
and with the extra 2, with I never have that problem with the Poly 6 or with the Juno 106 that I have. I mean, I don't play Chopin on it, you know what I mean? But
6 voices is helpful.
You can get 6 voices is much better than 4.
Yeah, I take your point. I take your point. I know, Gaz, were you disappointed that it wasn't 6 voices? It just felt like it was completely. The ideal opportunity.
Absolutely. And I mean, for whatever their kind of strategy or financial thing was, the amount of negativity that this has generated online only because of that polyphony aspect, which is quite funny, it kind of makes you think, and as Jem said, why not put 2 of the chips in there and sort of
bump the price up a bit?
I think people would be, wouldn't mind paying a little bit extra for the extra polyphony, because probably wouldn't be a huge amount difference. So it just seems like a little bit of a strange move, and that does kind of connect a little bit earlier to what we were talking about with the other with the Jupiters as well, where it just feels like they don't quite get what people want. They kind of
it's an interesting one because all of the presentations were opened with "We've been listening to our users," and same with the Groovebox, and they wanted the Groovebox, which is the MC707 as well.
It felt like with the whole IRA range that Roland had been listening and making products much closer to, and things like the when the TR8 became the TR8S, that really felt like that was a really significant development that brought it much more to what people were kind of looking for in a drum machine. Whereas I just kind of wonder which focus groups they've been sort of asking about for the Jupiter X, and for this Juno module as well. It's quite curious. I do think, however, that the real estate that was taken up by the strips on previous boutiques being ditching that and putting the controls on makes a lot more sense. I mean, if you're going to have a little module like that, you're going to probably be driving it from another keyboard. I mean, obviously they had their little KB25 or whatever it was called, but it is much better to have some more buttons.
No, you're absolutely right. I think you're right. I think the other thing is, the 3 previous Septembers, say for instance, where they've done their launches, there's been one or two, or some really good products coming out of it, and it just feels like with this one, they haven't quite achieved the same heights. I don't know whether that's just a sense I'm getting, because it seems just from our small sample of panels and reading YouTube comments, it feels like it didn't quite get the result they were perhaps after. But I mean, I hope it reflects in sales and they're enough, because the thing is, Yoad, you were saying that the XM or the X was actually something that you would consider for reasons I hadn't thought about. So maybe it's all going to be okay.
You know what? And I would even consider it more if it was in a rec format, let alone a plugin. A plugin will be ideal for me, but even a rec, because I just don't have enough. You've seen my studio, it's not small, but I have a lot of stuff, and every additional piece of gear has to be kind of,
justified,
accounted for.
It either has to be beautiful or very functional, or both,
with loads of lights. Yeah. Exactly.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it's interesting. But so I guess maybe we'll get onto the other Roland stuff another time, because there's just so much to do. Because the other big news is, I don't know if we saw this, but Behringer have been on the move again, and this is more of a sort of personnel thing. I mean, they've hired the guy. I'm trying to, if I get his name pronunciation right, this is going to be Hiroaki Nishijima, who is the guy who basically brought to life, conceived the MS-20, or one of the team, and they brought him on board to start a new kind of synth innovation center in Tokyo, where they're going to start building and designing new instruments. They also got the guy from Glis, I think, what's he called? Is it Glee? Can't remember what it is. Who's been doing a load of work on aftermarket firmware for old synths, notably the DSI Poly 600 or the sequential Poly 600. So they're really starting to pull this team together, and it seems like at the same time we've got sort of Roland and the other big guys sort of going, yes, after our 5-year cycle we're doing this, and yet Behringer are just kind of moving nimbly and fast into the market. And it's quite interesting, because I know that they've taken a lot of criticism, but we have now seen that Uli Behringer has put his money and his considerable investment where his mouth is. He said, I love synths, I want to make synths, and that's exactly what he's doing. And so we might see some very exciting stuff, I think. I don't know, Jem, I'll get you on, because you haven't been on for years, so we haven't spoken to you since all of this new age clones, and not only that, but the DeepMind 12 and the Neutron, the kind of new synths from Behringer come out. Have you experienced any of them? Have you tried any of them?
I had a DeepMind for a while, which again, I've got this rule that if something isn't turned on for 3 months, it goes on eBay. But it's just this thing of I was actually, with that thing you were saying, I've got it pulled up here. It's Nishijima, when he says, these days it's difficult for current Japanese companies to create the types of synths that I used to develop. That's a really interesting statement, I thought.
Yeah, and probably one that was incredibly well thought about before it was released as well.
I mean, I think that's a really telling statement, that, because it's I don't think we're not making this. We're not imagining this. I think there is perhaps a culture of not inflexibility, but but kind of once a decision has been made, I think it's a very long process by the sounds of it. Whereas with Behringer, I think they're very much more like, we can do this, let's do that, and let's keep going. Their TR-808 thing, I'm interested in. Look, that sounds very good from what I've heard online so far.
Yeah, I
can. 8080 of the things.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, we had a look at that, and it did sound it's got that thing going on. I mean, it's not the same physical presence, but it's not bad. It's pretty big, isn't it? I mean, it's still got that thing.
It's huge.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it, Gaz? I think this is. I mean, it's a great big message to the industry more than anything else. You will take me seriously. Essentially. Yeah,
and and really intriguing. And I just wonder what on earth he must have been concocting in his mind since the MS-20.
Yeah, what's he going to do? That would be really interesting.
Yeah, to sort of have all of those ideas and then to have a platform to be able to explore that. And
will it be analog? Will it be digital? Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of who cares really about analog and digital right now?
That's true.
I do feel like that. I mean, we've talked about that, I think, on the show, last show, that we feel we've kind of moved on a little bit from the hang up of that, but I mean, he if he has that freedom then to create without being so bound by the kind of rigid corporate structures that does kind of sadly kind of scupper Japanese. I mean, we were talking about this the other day, weren't we, Nick? How Japanese, they dominated, didn't they? Sort of the synth world and music tech world, they dominated for 25 years.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And very few companies outside of Japan were making any. I mean, Alesis, I guess, were. There's
an American surgeons, wasn't there? Mackie, Alesis, and those guys came in and started to really shake it out.
In the 90s, I suppose, But I mean, but now if you look at things, I mean, obviously we've still got Korg and Yamaha and Roland, and they still make excellent products. But in terms of being the cultural leaders, that not so much. So interesting. I think this is very, very interesting news. The MS-20 was like almost was a really radical synth for its day, wasn't it? Very creative design.
Exactly. I mean, it was aggressive and harmonically kind of unstable, which at the time of perhaps other instruments coming out of Japan, it was much less polite and irreverent. It was, it was quite a different sound world it inhabited. I agree. Yeah, there's chaos in there. There's a lot of chaos in it, which is not something you tend to associate with that era of products. It's interesting. I know, Johan, this could be kind of interesting. I mean, I think this sort of new epoch of being able to move fast and do that. I guess if you got your own factory, you just kind of go, get everything out of the way. Hold the PA speakers. We're going to be going with the whatever we've decided to make this week. I mean, that must be a great vibe. I mean, what a toy to play with. I'm sure, effectively.
I'm sure it doesn't quite work like that.
No, I'm sure
it's it's a massive organization, and they have budgets and they have plans and they have all that. But I have to say that again, and this kind of relates to what I said at the beginning of the show about old synths and all that. All these Behringer, this new stuff, the analog stuff, and the OBX, which is in the pipeline as well. It's really interesting because these are small boxes, and the Neutron, which sounds amazing, the kind of Minimoog,
the Model D, yeah, called.
The Model D, the SH101, all these are just great things to have. They're small. I'm sure they're more reliable than the original stuff, which is like 40 or 50 years old by now, 40 more. I spend a lot of money and a lot of grief on things that are not working, and I have to fix them. I have a CS70 which is in need of some repair, and my JX3P, something wrong with it, and every time there's something else. And with these new toys, they sound pretty much, they sound good enough. And like I said, that doesn't matter whether it's a Jupiter X, a digital one, or, I mean, it kind of does, but for
I
what
think
you get out of it, and especially the Behringer ones, it's a no-brainer. You know, they're cheap, they're nice, they're small, they don't take too much space. They do pretty much the same thing as the original, if not better.
And hopefully, you know, as we see, there'll be more of this. And it's also down to the UX, the user experience, you know, because, you know, plugins and whatnot can change everything. I know, Yoad, you have a very comprehensive kind of central point where you can control all of that stuff, but, you know, that you can't be putting your hands on something. And some of these synths still have a lot of that going on. And that's possibly the thing that is the most now, you know, the hands-on side of things. I don't know. Jem, do you? Sorry, I'll come back to you in a sec, Gaz. Jem, I mean, you know, you're working every day on stuff. I mean, I see you've got physical interfaces in front of you. Presumably, you do a ton of stuff in the box. Do you feel that you have to have a physical interface to kind of grab hold of to get the best out of a particular thing, or do you find workarounds to get the best of both worlds?
With synths, I do. I quite like, and this is one of the reasons why I've got all these things. There's a Prophet 6 up here. It's kind of that sometimes is very, very, you know, it's control surfaces are great for that sort of thing. But that's one of the reasons why I've never really got on with iPad music apps, because I can't. It's sort of the screen is. I mean, they're brilliant, but sometimes it's very difficult to kind of interact with them. I find because I'm an old man. So it's sort of like, I think. I do. I mean, the Pro 1 thing that they're working on. I mean, that's another thing I'd like to get hold of, because it sounds brilliant, but also it's, you know, the form and function is great. It's one of the reasons why I think with the boutique things were maybe it was erring a little bit on, they were too small. You know, I think it was on the Jupiter or one of the
the JP8. It's literally 3 centimeter faders is kind of getting a bit tricky. Yeah,
but there's a thing. I mean, I think what Behringer have done is brilliant. But I mean, I kind of think on a slight aside, I'm looking at Uli Behringer today. He's something of the Bond villain about him.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And he's been cast in that role to a degree as well, and he's sort of. I think he enjoys. I suspect he enjoys that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think it's right. I think it's kind of. I mean, it's that sort of kind of this brilliant image. You know, we've got all these TB303s, and meanwhile there's a silo of missiles in the Gobi Desert aimed at the moon. That's the kind of. It's. I like that sort of thing. No, I think I've done a really good job. I'm a fan. I'm definitely a fan.
Yeah. Sorry, Gaz. I was on my way. I'm passing from right to left there.
Well, I was just going to sort of plug. I've just put a little video up on my Gaz Williams YouTube channel where a friend of mine who's a drummer, he came over and we did a little jam using the RD8, and I was playing some bass. But the reason why I was mentioning that, apart from the blatant plug, was to do with the kind of hands-on thing. And although there's not an awful lot of manipulation of the RD8, the fact is that you can just reach over, and Chris does that. He sort of he's scratching. He's using a little record deck which he's scratching, and he's sort of simultaneously then manipulating the RD8. And it's that sort of thing really about being able to have the immediacy and the fun that is, and that's something I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of videos which are exploring just multi people user sort of jamming kind of situations, and you know, and it's something that I've kind of banged on about for years really with computers, is just how it's taken away the democracy of music making, you know, that the
at the point of creation, right? Yeah, perhaps,
at the point of creation, that the mouser has way too much control. And yes, you can break out loads of controllers to a single computer, so it's not, you know, that in itself is, you can get around it. But these devices, like for instance with the RD8, something that's really nice about it is you alluded to the physical presence of the 808, but the RD8 is a big old thing.
Yeah, it is big. That's true.
But but being big does give it something which I think in the heat of the moment, like in a jam, you know, the mindset of just being able to reach and grab something instantly, you know, and just be able to navigate the field of knobs and just go straight into it, and you know, and it's not so something to be said for sort of like larger formats. And,
oh, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree, because the sled is like the Sledge. When I reviewed the Sledge, it was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. There's so much space between everything. You could just kind of reach in. You're not going to knock a knob by it. You kind of know where it is. There's room for the labels. I mean, it's quite a decadent control surface, but it really does. It makes it makes the synth feel perhaps better than it is, even though what it makes up in control, do you see what I mean? It feels more of a thing because it's got all of that part going on. I totally agree.
Yeah. So, but I mean, something I think is kind of interesting though is that with those Behringer rack format, the format which maybe the first one out was the D, the Behringer D, but like they made that a slightly different format, a little bit narrower, didn't they? And everyone subsequently from the Neutron onwards, and the K2 and the upcoming Pro 1, they're all the same.
So they'll
width.
fit in a 19. Is that the idea?
Because
they will fit in Eurorack, won't they? I think.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think they do, don't they? I mean, the Neutron does. So I guess they would, but also to fit them into those, ways that you can stack them in a nice in a nice kind of shape. But I really like with the other ones how they're putting all of the connectivity on the right hand side. So
I think that's genius.
Patching, keeps it all.
I'm a big fan of that. Well, Mother 32 were the first ones, and obviously the original Korgs do that, and it just makes so much more sense to me. It's easier to see what's going on. I suppose that there is some other good news in the world. Gaz, I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear, and maybe everybody else. We've now got a headphone socket back on the current iPad model, which was announced. The Big Apple Day yesterday. I don't care about the phones or anything, but I thought you might find that. I know. I'll come to you, Jem. You're not an iPad user from a musical point of view, or maybe not as much. You were saying.
Yeah, not as much. I mean, there's Gaz, you use that sampler, don't you? That app, which is brilliant.
That's
Sampler.
the best. Yeah.
Sampler, yeah. I mean that's a fantastic app. I kind of headphone socket's always a good thing, isn't it?
Zero latency monitoring. It's just an absolute essential, surely. I mean, it's
exactly.
Isn't that the first thing that you would think of, really? I mean, rather than Bluetooth delay. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's really. I know, Yoad, you were talking about Bluetooth. There was Bluetooth on something. You said you just can't use it because it doesn't work.
Plus, I like the sound of unbalanced mini plug connectors. There's something about it when really. I mean, when you, especially in a studio where everything is balanced and you don't use a DI, you just use pins 1 and 2 to connect to, or 1 and 3 rather, on the XLR to connect to the Neve or something. It sounds huge. There's something about it that sounds. Just with all the interference and everything, there's
is it the impedance and stuff as well? Mismatch,
apps.
I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, it is, and the fact that it's unbalanced, so it doesn't go kind of, it's a real thing, because in order to make something balanced, you have to basically destroy it and put it back together, and the way things are basically created or formed is unbalanced. When you have a guitar pickup or a mic, it's unbalanced, and in order to reduce interference, you turn it into balance. But there's something about the sound, especially in a balanced system. So when I plug stuff to my Neve which is unbalanced, you can immediately hear the sound. It's a little bit less toppy, and less clear, but there's something about it. After all, we're all about kind of lo-fi and big sound and fat sound and all that, and that just does it.
That's really interesting.
I was actually thinking the other day, I used to have a Fostex X15.
The multi-track, yeah.
When I was, in my teens. And I was actually thinking maybe I should look it up on eBay, because there was something about the sound of these phono, outputs that you just to run stuff through it in input, like record pause, and just run stuff through it, because there's something about that sound that I really miss.
It's really
so,
it's like
yeah,
what you need. So, Yoad, I feel that there's an anti-DI. It's a negative DI unit that you're looking for, really, which is kind of there's a thing there. There's a product in there somewhere. That's a really interesting idea. Fantastic.
Just a quick note about sampler without the e, sampler, which is Bristolian actually, isn't it? Sampler.
Yeah. Sampler.
Which I do think is the greatest all-time touch interface for instruments. But sadly, I don't think it's had an update since about 2014. And on my iPad Pro, it just doesn't. You can't sample into it. It essentially doesn't work. And I was really heartbroken. However, on answering a Jacob Hack tweet a couple of days ago, Marcus Alonso, who I have to say had got headhunted by Apple, and I think he's quite high up in the human interface design part of Apple, which is really telling because as Jem was saying, a lot of iPad synth apps or whatever, the interface does leave a lot to be desired, but Sampler is the masterpiece of touch interface. It really is. So it's kind of it's interesting that Apple had snaffled him, but in the Jacob Hack tweet, there was a post from Sampler saying something's coming soon. So we don't know what it is.
That sounds good. Well, you'll be
Hopefully
on it.
Just an update.
At the very least.
Yeah.
At the very least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, where was I going? I've just seen this. Hang on. In the chat room, it says. Oh no, it doesn't. It's in the YouTube chat room. Massive capital letters. Where has it gone? Nick patronising Gaz. Sorry, did I? I do beg your pardon if I had done that.
I'm used to it.
Oh, well, that's fair enough. It's part of our relationship. I didn't think I had, but then I guess that's the nature of being patronising, isn't it? You don't realise you're doing it. Right. Okay. Right then. I'm not quite sure how to escape from that rather telling comment.
Did you see the new Dreadbox news, though, Nick?
No, I didn't. It's almost impossible to keep up with the news.
No. It is a Eurorack module, but it does look really interesting. It's like a synth voice, but I think is it 8 sine waves, so it looks like it's some sort of additive synthesizer-y sort of thing in a module. Looks quite, as I'm a huge Dreadbox fan, so that was just wanted to squeeze that in because that's quite. I think that's. I don't know. Maybe when was it?
Analog monophonic. Okay, frequency level. Oh, so you could basically envelope all of the control voltage all separately with a spring.
Yeah. The spring. Always, I'm a sucker for a spring. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. We'll have to keep an eye out for that. It's almost impossible to keep up with. But anyway, should point out the Knobcon stuff is coming up very soon. We got a couple of videos out. I think the Hydrosynth stuff. There's loads more. Jim's done a fantastic job. Thank you very much, Jim. He's got to go back to real life now and stop thinking about synthesizers and start thinking about the day job, I'd imagine, which is always difficult. Thank you. Yes, like I say, next week I'm hoping we're going to have a show. There won't be one the week after because I will literally be somewhere over East Asia coming back from Japan, but we will be in Japan where we'll be interviewing a whole bunch of Japanese engineers for Meet the Makers. We're going to get some interesting content, have a tour around their synth museum. There's going to be some great stuff, so do stay tuned. We'll be posting on all our social media stuff. Yoad, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you. And now I feel that we know each other even better because we shared a pint afterwards. A pie and a pint, in fact, almost. We've got a great tour of Yoad's studio and some really interesting stuff coming up. But it's just 6 product releases last week, just no time. So it's coming. Stay tuned for that. And also, Jem, thank you. It's been a pleasure having you on. What have you got to get back to now? Have you got to rush back to some impending deadline, or are you just...
No, more Peter Gunn. And I see that my backlight's just failed. So I'm going to take this to my tech.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That tiny two-row LCD that you can't... Without it, you can't see anything. Oh,
exactly. Wow. Yeah, exactly. Never mind. No, I'm just more of the same, really. I'm, staying out of trouble.
Excellent.
But it's nice to be back.
Yeah, lovely to have you. Well, welcome anytime, of course. And, of course,
Thank
Gaz
you.
Williams, thank you very much for joining us as well, if I could say that in the most non-patronising way as possible.
Can I just say one thing, though? Because we did just mention this little mixer. There is something that is kind of really good to mention about it for some people who'll be really interested in, is that it's got like noise filtering in it. It's only about 15 quid, so it's a cheap thing, but it will. So if you power, say, a bunch of Volcas using MyVolt's own kind of splitter cable, possibly, there can be quite a bit of noise. This thing kind of, not only does it sort of like do 5 into 1, it also clears up the noise, and it clears up that horrible noise that you get on the OP1 off the USB. So you can. Yes, you can kind of use this
that's
little
what you
thing.
need. You need one of those in your centre section of your Neve. Is it stereo? I haven't read the blurb yet. Is it stereo?
Yeah, it's stereo. It's 5 stereo. Yeah, but the output, I should say though, is very quiet. So you can't just stick a pair of headphones in and sort of do it.
Because it's
you
passive.
do need to sort of then.
Yeah,
it's passive. So, but I mean, and it really does bring the volume down quite a bit. However, what comes out there is clean, and it gets rid of ground hum, all sorts of nasty stuff. So I wanted to mention that though, because I think they've done a good job in doing that. Because for your pocket operators, Volcas and boutiques and OP1s and that kind of stuff, I think it's a really neat little solution, and it's cheap as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. Folks, don't forget, if you want to enter the competition to win a copy of Neutron 3, we're looking for the hashtag repair mix master. That's one word, no spaces, and the hashtag Neutron 3 to @Sonicstate and @Isotope Inc. That's a Twitter competition. And that's it for this week. That was Sonic Talk, episode 589. We'll see you all as soon as. See you, folks. Thanks very much for joining us. Bye now.